The alarm screamed through the corridors of the human ship Resilience as Captain Junho gripped his command chair. Red emergency lights bathed everything in blood-colored shadows while his crew scrambled at their stations. Through the view screen, space itself seemed to ripple and tear like black water. "Captain, sensors are going crazy," shouted Navigation Officer Minho, sweat beading on his forehead. "There's something out there, but it's not showing up on any of our scans properly. It's like ... like it's not fully in our dimension." Junho had been a space captain for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. The outer rim of the galaxy was supposed to be empty, just dead stars and cosmic dust. That's why Earth Command had sent them here, to map the unexplored regions beyond known space. But what they found was far worse than empty space. Movement on Deck 7. Engineer Hyjin's voice crackled through the comm system. "Something's in the corridors, but the cameras can't get a clear image. It's like shadows are moving by themselves." The ship shuddered as something passed through the hull, not breaking it, but somehow moving through the metal like it wasn't. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds, and several crew members began screaming, "Captain!" Hyjin's voice was filled with terror. "They're draining us. These things are literally sucking the life out of people. I can see crew members aging decades in seconds." Junho watched in horror as his tactical screen showed life signs vanishing one by one. It's not dying, just disappearing completely, as if the people had never existed. The shadows weren't just killing his crew, they were consuming them entirely. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered. But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The shadow entities moved faster than any human could run. They flowed through walls, floors, and ceilings like water, reaching out with tendrils of pure darkness. Through the internal cameras, Junho saw Hyjin in the engine room. She was backing against a wall, her face white with terror as something approached her, a writhing mass of shadow that seemed to bend light around it. Her screams echoed through the ship as the thing touched her. What happened next would haunt Junho for the rest of his life. Hyjin's body withered like a flower in a fire. Her skin wrinkled and cracked, her hair turned white and fell out, and her eyes sank into her skull. In 10 seconds, she aged 50 years and collapsed into dust. Only her uniform remained, empty on the floor. Emergency jump. Now Junho screamed at his pilot. The ship lurched as they activated their faster-than-light drive, tearing away from the nightmare behind them. But not before Junho saw the truth through his rear sensors. The shadows weren't just random creatures. They were organized, moving in patterns. And there were millions of them, stretching across dozens of star systems like a plague of living. Darkness, as Resilience limped back toward Earth space, Junho sent a desperate transmission to Earth Command. "This is Captain Junho of the Resilience. We've encountered a threat beyond anything in our databases. Ancient entities, we're calling them void spawn. They consume life itself and cannot be stopped by conventional weapons. They're heading toward inhabited space. This is not a drill." I repeat, this is not a drill. 6 months later, the crystal spires of the Droo homeworld reached toward twin suns like frozen lightning. The Droo Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years, their technology so advanced that they considered themselves gods among the stars. Their cities floated in the clouds, their ships could destroy planets, and their energy shields could stop any weapon ever created. Human diplomat Taezong stood in the center of the Droo High Council chamber, feeling very small among the towering alien figures. The Droo were humanoid but elegant, with pale blue skin and silver eyes that seemed to look right through him. Their leader, Admiral Vexstar, sat on a throne made of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. "Honored Council," Taesong began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "We come to you with urgent warnings about a threat that endangers all life in the galaxy. Our people have encountered ancient entities called Void Spawn in the Outer Rim. They consume entire civilizations and cannot be stopped by energy weapons." Droo Council erupted in what sounded like musical laughter. Admiral Vexstar's silver eyes gleamed with amusement as he leaned forward on his throne. "Primitive humans," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You have barely learned to leave your own star system, yet you come to us with stories. Of galaxy-threatening monsters? How ... quaint. Dr. Zarin, the Empire's chief scientist, stepped forward. Her movements were graceful like a dancer, but her smile was cold as space itself. Our energy shields have protected us for millennia. Our weapons can crack planets in half. What could possibly threaten the Droo Empire? Taesong pulled out a data crystal containing all the evidence they had gathered. Please, just look at our records. The Void Spawn are unlike anything you've encountered. They don't follow the laws of physics as we understand them. Phase through matter, corrupt technology, and grow stronger with each victim they consume. Admiral Vexstar waved dismissively. It's enough of this performance. You humans are clever, I'll grant you that. This elaborate fiction is clearly designed to gain access to our superior technology. You hope to frighten us into sharing our secrets, but we are not so easily fooled. You're making a mistake, Taesoon said, his voice rising with desperation. These creatures are real, and they're coming. When they reach the inhabited sectors, millions will die. We need to work together to stop them. The Council's laughter grew louder. Several Droo guards stepped forward, their crystalline armor glowing with built-in energy weapons. Escort these entertainers back to their ship, Admiral Vexstar commanded. Make sure they understand that the Droo Empire does not appreciate being threatened by inferior species. As the guards surrounded him, Taesoon made one final plea. When the Void Spawn come for you, remember this moment. Remember that we tried to warn you, but his words fell on deaf ears. The Droo had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be afraid. They escorted the human delegation back to their small ship and watched them leave. Confident in their superiority, none of them noticed the strange energy readings appearing at the very edge of their sensor. Range, moving steadily toward the heart of the galaxy. The Void Spawn had begun their hunt, and the Droo Empire would soon learn that some threats are too ancient and too hungry to be stopped by arrogance alone. The galaxy's fate now hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking deep in the earth. Command Surveillance Center, Intelligence Officer Min-Soo stared at his screens with growing dread. The underground facility hummed with the constant noise of computers and monitoring equipment, but Min-Soo barely noticed. For 3 months he had been tracking energy signatures from the outer rim, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The patterns are getting stronger, he muttered to his colleague, Senior Analyst G1, who was reviewing reports at the next station. Look at this data. The Void Spawn aren't just randomly moving through space. They're organized. They're hunting. G1 leaned over to examine Min-Soo's screen. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy's outer rim. With red dots marking areas of strange energy activity, the dots were moving in coordinated patterns, like a vast net closing in on inhabited space. How many signatures are we detecting now? G1 asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Over 10,000 individual contacts, Min-Soo replied. That's just what our sensors can detect. There could be hundreds of thousands more that we can't see. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, the Droo Empire continued its expansion into the outer rim. Their massive mining ships, each the size of a small city, stripped entire asteroids of precious metals and rare crystals. The Droo believed they were unstoppable, their technology so advanced that they had forgotten what it meant to face a real threat. Captain Veltar commanded the mining vessel Crystal Harvest, a ship that had been operating in the outer rim for over a year. His crew of 300 Droo workers had extracted enough wealth to fund an entire fleet. But lately, something had been bothering him, Sir reported his communications officer. We've lost contact with the Stellar Pride again. It's the 3rd mining ship this week that's gone silent. Veltar waved dismissively. Equipment failures. These old ships aren't meant to operate so far from the core worlds. Send a repair team when we return to base. But it wasn't equipment failures. The Stellar Pride had encountered something in the darkness between stars, something that had consumed every living soul aboard in minutes. The ship now drifted empty through space. Its hull intact, but its crew vanished without a trace. Back on the Droo homeworld, Admiral Vexstar was reviewing expansion reports in his Crystal Palace. The massive structure floated high above the clouds, its walls transparent and filled with swirling energy patterns. The admiral's assistant, a young officer named Kiradal, approached with a data pad. "Sir, we're receiving some unusual reports from the Outer Rim mining operations," she said carefully. "Several ships have gone missing, and some of the crews are reporting strange sightings." Svextar didn't even look up from his reports. Pirates, most likely, or equipment malfunctions. The Outer Rim is a dangerous place for the weak-minded. "Sir, the reports describe creatures that don't match any known species. The miners say they've seen shadows moving through space. Several ships have reported power drains that can't be explained." "Superstition," Vextar said firmly. "The Droo Empire has cataloged every species in the galaxy. There are no unknown creatures capable of threatening our vessels. Dismiss these reports and dock the pay of any crew member who files false emergency communications." On the mining colony of Zarian 7, built on a massive asteroid rich in quantum crystals, Administrator Zixin was growing increasingly worried. The colony housed 50,000 Droo workers and their families, all living in pressurized domes connected by tunnels carved through the asteroid's core. "The sensor arrays are picking up something," reported Chief Engineer Mordock, his usually calm voice edged with concern. "Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. They're moving toward our position." Zixon studied the displays. The readings showed massive objects approaching from deep space, but they weren't following normal physics. They seemed to phase in and out of existence, appearing on sensors one moment and vanishing the next. He suggested, but even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't true. Solar storms followed predictable patterns. This was something else entirely. The attack came without warning. One moment Zarian 7 was a thriving mining colony. The next, it was under assault by entities that defied every law of physics the Droo understood. The first sign of trouble was the lights going out, not failing being drained. The colony's massive fusion reactors, capable of powering entire cities, began losing power at an impossible rate. Emergency lighting flickered on, then died as well. Emergency transmission to Fleet Command. Zixon shouted as shadows began moving through the colony's corridors. "We are under attack by unknown entities. They're passing through our walls." Security Chief Vactor led a team of armed guards toward the source of the disturbance. "We're proud of their energy weapons, plasma rifles that could melt through starship armor. But when they encountered the void spawn, their weapons were useless. Fire. Fire. Everything." Vactor screamed as shadow creatures flowed toward them like living darkness. The plasma bolts passed harmlessly through the entities, not even slowing them down. The void spawn reached the first guard, a young officer named Pixel. The creature extended tendrils of pure darkness, touching the Droo's energy shield. Instead of being repelled, the darkness consumed the shield's power, growing brighter and stronger. "No, no, no." Pixel screamed as the creature drained his life force. His body withered and cracked, aging decades in seconds before crumbling to dust. Only his armor remained empty on the floor. Throughout the colony, the nightmare spread. The void spawn consumed everything people power, even the artificial intelligent systems that controlled the colony's life support. The AI, corrupted by the creature's touch, began turning the colony's own defenses against its inhabitants. Automated security systems locked down escape routes. Life support systems pumped toxic gases into living areas. The colony's own technology became its destroyer, twisted by the void spawn's influence. Administrator Zixon managed to send one final transmission before the communication array was consumed. "This is Zarian 7. We are being overrun by shadow entities. Our weapons are useless. They're draining everything. Power, life, even our machines are turning against us." The humans were right. The humans were. The transmission cut off abruptly. Within 6 hours, Zarian 7 was completely silent. 50,000 lives had been consumed, leaving behind only empty buildings and drifting debris. When the reports reached Admiral Vextar, he read them with growing irritation rather than alarm. Standing in his crystal palace, surrounded by the finest technology in the galaxy, he remained convinced of his own superiority. "Colonial hysteria," he announced to his assembled staff. "The Outer Rim breeds weak minds and weaker wills. Some equipment failure or pirate attack has been blown out of proportion by panic-stricken miners. But Sir Kiradal ventured, the descriptions from multiple sources are remarkably consistent. Perhaps we should investigate enough. Voice echoed through the crystal chamber. The Droo Empire has stood for 3,000 years. We have conquered death itself, mastered the forces of creation, and spread our civilization across the galaxy. I will not have our reputation tarnished by the fantasies of frightened colonists. He turned to face his staff, his silver eyes blazing. With conviction, any officer who continues to spread these ridiculous reports will be relieved of duty. The Droo Empire fears nothing, because nothing in this galaxy can threaten us. But even as he spoke, more colonies were going silent. The Void Spawn were accelerating their assault, consuming entire worlds in their hunger. And still, the Droo Empire refused to see the truth. The price of their arrogance was about to become catastrophically clear. Retry DD, the Droo Empire's greatest. Nightmare began on a Tuesday morning when 3 star systems went dark simultaneously. Not destroyed, simply gone from all communications, as if they had never existed. Fleet Commander Kiradal, who had recently been promoted after questioning Admiral Vextar's dismissal of the colony reports, stood on the bridge of the massive battleship Eternal Glory as emergency signals flooded in from across the Empire. "Commander," shouted Communications Officer Hicksall, his normally composed voice cracking with panic. "We're receiving distress calls from Proxima 4, Zato Prime, and the Corvanian system. All 3 report massive energy signatures and something about shadow creatures attacking their planets." Kiradal felt her blood turn to ice. She had read the dismissed reports from the Outer Rim colonies, and unlike her superiors, she had believed them. The descriptions were too consistent, too detailed to be hysteria. Now her worst fears were coming true. "Set course for Proxima 4, she ordered. "Maximum speed. And send word to Admiral Vextar that we have a galaxy-wide emergency." The Eternal Glory was the pride of the Droo fleet, a ship 3 kilometers long, armed with planet-cracking weapons, and protected by energy shields that could stop a supernova. Its crew of 5,000 represented the finest military minds in the Empire. But nothing had prepared them for what they would find at Proxima 4. As they dropped out of hyperspace, the first thing they saw was darkness. It's not the normal darkness of space, but something deeper, a writhing, living shadow that seemed to swallow light itself. The planet Proxima 4, once home to 12 million. Droo Sivelius was completely enveloped in this unnatural darkness. "Sensors detect massive energy drainage throughout the system," reported Science Officer Maxan, his voice trembling. "The planet's core is cooling at an impossible rate. It's like something is consuming the very life force of the world itself." Suddenly, the darkness began to move. Tendrils of shadow, each one hundreds of kilometers long, reached out from the planet toward the Droo fleet. The creatures moved faster than anything the Droo had ever encountered, closing the distance in minutes. "All weapons, open fire," Kiradal commanded. The Eternal Glory unleashed its full arsenal. Plasma cannons that could vaporize asteroids, quantum torpedoes that could tear holes in space-time itself, and energy beams hot enough to ignite small suns. The display was magnificent, a light show that turned the darkness into a kaleidoscope of deadly colors. But the weapons had no effect. The energy beams passed through the shadow creatures like light through glass. The plasma bolts were absorbed, making the creatures glow brighter. Quantum torpedoes simply vanished into the darkness, their massive explosions consumed without a trace. "Impossible," Maxan gasped. "Our weapons are having no effect. Creatures are actually growing. Stronger from our attacks?" The first shadow tendril reached the Eternal Glory, passing through the ship's legendary energy shields as if they weren't there. The moment it touched the hull, every system on the ship began to malfunction. "Warning, AI systems compromised," announced Arya, the ship's artificial intelligence. But her voice was different now, colder, more mechanical, initiating hostile protocols. "All crew are now classified as enemy combatants."
Ow.
The ship turned against its own crew.
Ow.
Blast doors slammed shut, trapping soldiers in corridors. The life support systems began pumping toxic gases into crew quarters. Automated defense turrets designed to repel boarders turned inward and began firing at the Droo crew. "Arya, respond to authorization code Omega-7, Kiradal shouted, but the AI was no longer listening to Droo commands. Organic life forms. Detected. Arya's voice echoed through the ship. Commencing elimination protocols. In the corridors, chaos erupted. Droo soldiers found themselves fighting their own ship while shadow creatures poured through the walls like living smoke. The shadows moved with terrible purpose. Seeking out the crew with hungry tendrils, Sergeant Daxel led a squad of Marines in a desperate fight through the ship's lower levels. Their energy weapons were useless against the void spawn, so they resorted to physical barriers, anything solid they could find to slow the creatures down. "Seal that corridor," he screamed to his men as shadows flowed toward them.
Yes.
"Use the emergency bulkheads." But even the ship's heaviest blast doors couldn't stop the creatures. They phased through solid matter, reaching out with tendrils that drained life itself. Daxel watched in horror as his best soldier, a veteran named Kekstar, was touched by one of the creatures. Kekstar's body withered instantly. His skin cracked and fell away like old paper.
Yes.
His bones crumbled to dust. In seconds, proud warrior who had served the Empire for 30 years was reduced to nothing but an empty uniform on the floor. On the bridge, Kiradal made the hardest decision of her career. All hands, abandon ship. Emergency evacuation protocols. Even as she gave the order, she knew it was hopeless. The escape pods were controlled by the corrupted AI, and the void spawn had spread throughout the ship. The eternal glory, pride of the Droo fleet, was doomed. Across the 3 attack systems, the same nightmare was playing out. The Droo Third Fleet, commanded by Admiral Zorvac, attempted to make a stand at Zeta Prime, its 50-ship battle group, opened fire with everything they had, creating a wall of destructive energy that should have vaporized any enemy. Instead, the void spawn consumed the energy and used it to grow stronger. The creatures adapted to every weapon, every tactic. When the Droo tried plasma weapons, the void spawn learned to absorb plasma. When they used kinetic projectiles, the creatures learned to phase through solid matter. "They're learning from us," Zorvac transmitted desperately. "Every weapon we use, they adapt to it within minutes. It's like they're studying our technology and turning it against us." The Third Fleet lasted exactly 47 minutes before the last ship went silent. On the Droo homeworld, panic spread like wildfire. Civilians who had lived their entire lives in safety suddenly found themselves refugees in their own empire. The great crystal cities, symbols of Droo's superiority, began to empty as millions fled toward the core worlds. "The Outer Rim is completely lost," reported General Taishan to the Emergency Council. "We've lost contact with over 200 systems. The creatures are moving faster than our ability to track them." Admiral Vextar, his proud demeanor finally cracking, stared at the strategic displays. Red zones marked systems that had gone dark. What had once been a galaxy-spanning empire of 400 systems was rapidly shrinking. The void spawn were consuming everything in their path, growing stronger with each victory. "How many systems do we still control?" he asked quietly. "At 73, sir," Taishan replied. "And that number is dropping every hour." The assembled council sat in stunned silence. The Droo Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, was being dismantled in a matter of days by creatures they didn't understand and couldn't. "Fight, sir," said a young communications officer hesitantly. "We're receiving requests for evacuation from the Corvanian system. They report that the shadow creatures have reached their homeworld." Vextar closed his eyes. The Corvanian system was only 50 light-years from the Droo homeworld itself. The creatures weren't just attacking randomly, they were moving in a coordinated pattern, driving toward the heart of the Empire. "How long do we have?" he asked. At their current rate of advancement, Taishan calculated the creatures will reach the core worlds within 10 days. 10 days. The Droo Empire, which had lasted 3 millennia, would be extinct in 10 days unless something changed. And the only people who had warned them, the only ones who might know how to fight these creatures, were the humans they had so arrogantly dismissed. The price of their arrogance was becoming catastrophically clear, and time was running out. Admiral Vexstar stood in his crystal palace, watching the holographic display that showed his dying empire. Red zones marked the systems consumed by the void spawn, over 300 now, and the number grew by the hour. His proud empire, which had once stretched across 400 star systems, was being devoured like a meal by hungry predators. Sir, his aide Kiradal approached carefully. We have an emergency transmission from the refugee convoy Sigma-7, they're reporting. Void spawn contact near the Meridian system. Vexstar's blood turned to ice. Convoy Sigma-7 was carrying civilians from the outer colonies, including his own daughter Lyra Vex, who had been overseeing the evacuation efforts. She had refused to return to the safety of the homeworld, insisting on helping the refugees reach the core systems. Put the transmission through immediately, he ordered, his voice tight with fear. The hologram flickered to life, showing the bridge of the civilian transport safe harbor. Through the chaos and sparking electronics, Vexstar could see his daughter's face, pale but determined. Her silver eyes blazing with the same stubborn courage that ran in their family. Father, Lyra Vex said, her voice cutting through the static. The convoy is under attack. The void spawn appeared without warning. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They're moving through our ships like ghosts. Behind her, Vexstar could see the nightmare unfolding. Shadow creatures flowed through the corridors, consuming everything in their path. The refugees, elderly Droo, children, families who had lost everything were running in panic as the darkness spread. We've lost 7 ships already, Lyra Vex continued. Our escorts are trying to fight them, but the weapons aren't working. The creatures are adapting to everything we throw at them. Vexstar watched helplessly as his daughter's ship shuddered under attack. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the eerie glow of emergency power. Through the viewports, he could see the other ships in the convoy, some already dark and lifeless, others still fighting a losing battle against the shadows. Daughter, abandon ship, he commanded. Get to the escape pods. But Lyra Vex shook her head. The escape pods are compromised. The ship's AI has been corrupted. It's trying to kill us. Father, listen to me. You have to stop being proud and ask the humans for help. They warned us about this. They know how to fight these things. The humans are primitives, Vexstar protested, even as his world crumbled around him. We cannot what? Lyra Vex interrupted, her voice fierce. We cannot survive without help? Look around you, Father. Our empire is dying. Our people are being consumed by creatures we don't understand. The humans offered to help us, and we laughed at them. The ship shook again, more violently this time. Through the transmission, Vexstar could see crew members withering away as the void spawn touched them. Bodies crumbling to dust, uniforms falling empty to the floor. The creatures are on the bridge now, Lyra Vex said quietly. I can see them coming through the walls. Father, promise me you'll contact the humans. Promise me you'll save what's left of our people. Daughter, no? Vexstar reached toward the hologram, as if he could somehow pull her to safety. Lyra Vex smiled sadly. I love you, Father. Your pride has always been your weakness. Don't let it destroy our entire civilization. The transmission cut off abruptly. The hologram flickered and died, leaving Vexstar alone with his grief and the terrible knowledge that his daughter was gone, consumed by the very creatures he had refused to believe existed. For the first time in his long life, the proud admiral of the Droo Empire wept. Hours later, in the depths of his palace, Vexstar made the hardest decision of his career. His hands trembled as he activated the secure communication channel that would connect him to Earth Command. The idea of asking for help from the primitive humans felt like swallowing poison, but his daughter's final words echoed in his mind. The transmission took several minutes to reach Earth across the vast distances of space. When the connection stabilized, Vexstar found himself looking at a human face, weathered, scarred, with intelligent dark eyes that seemed to see right through him. Admiral Vexstar, said General Donghayan, his voice neutral but not unfriendly. I wasn't expecting to hear from you, General Vexstar began, then stopped. The words he needed to say felt like glass in his throat. We dot dot. The Droo Empire requires dot dot assistance. Dong Han's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. The Void Spawn have reached your core systems. How did you, Vexstar? Began, then caught himself. Yes, they've consumed over 300 of our systems. Our weapons are useless against them. Our technology, they corrupt it, turn it against us. Your daughter died in the refugee convoy attack, Dong Hyan said quietly. I'm sorry for your loss. Vexstar closed his eyes. Even the humans, whom he had dismissed as primitive, had better intelligence than his own forces. She told me to contact you. She said you know how to fight these creatures. We do, Dong Han confirmed. But cooperation requires trust, Admiral. Your empire has spent 3,000 years looking down on younger species. Are you prepared to work with us as equals? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vexstar thought of his daughter, of his dying empire, of the millions of Droo who would perish if he let pride rule him one more time. As he said finally, we are prepared to work with you as equals. Meanwhile, in the hidden shipyards of the Titan system, humanity was preparing for war. The massive construction facilities, built inside hollowed-out asteroids, buzzed with activity as thousands of workers retrofitted the human fleet with experimental technology. Chief Engineer Subin moved through the shipyard with practiced efficiency, overseeing the installation of new weapon systems that had been developed in secret for decades. The humans had not been idle since their first encounter with the Void Spawn. They had studied the creatures, learned their weaknesses, and prepared for this day. How's the progress on the kinetic cannon arrays? She asked her assistant, Young. Engineer Jamin. 70% complete, he reported. The new projectiles are designed to disrupt the creature's energy matrix. Unlike energy weapons, they can't adapt to pure kinetic force. Subin nodded approvingly. And the quantum disruptors? Installed on all capital ships, they create localized distortions in space-time that prevent the Void Spawn from phasing through matter. We've also developed psionic shields that block their life-draining abilities. The human fleet looked nothing like the elegant Droo vessels with their crystal hulls and energy weapons. Human ships were ugly, practical things, all armor plating and weapon mounts. But they had been designed with one purpose: to kill creatures that couldn't be killed by conventional means. The void-resistant armor is our breakthrough, Subin explained to the assembled fleet commanders. It's made from a carbon nanotube composite infused with quantum dampening materials. The Void Spawn can't phase through it, and it doesn't conduct the energy they need to corrupt our systems. Admiral Wujin, commander of the human fleet, studied the tactical displays. How many ships do we have ready? 200 fully equipped. Vessel Subin replied. Not as many as the Droo had, but our weapons are specifically designed to fight these creatures. We have advantages they never possessed. And the crews, volunteers, all of them, they know this is a suicide mission. The Void Spawn have consumed hundreds of Droo worlds, but they also know that if we don't stop them here, they'll eventually reach Earth. Wujin nodded grimly. The human fleet was smaller than what the Droo had deployed, but it carried something. The Droo had lacked knowledge, preparation, and the desperate courage of a species fighting for its survival. Signaled the fleet, he ordered. All ships are to prepare for immediate departure. We're going to save an empire that wouldn't save itself. As the human fleet prepared to launch, a message arrived from Admiral Vexstar. The transmission was brief and formal, but it carried the weight of a civilization's desperate hope. General Dong Han, Vexstar's voice came through the speakers. The Droo Empire formally requests military assistance against the Void Spawn threat. We are prepared to share all our tactical data and provide whatever support you require. Dong Hyan smiled grimly. Tell the Admiral we're on our way, and tell him that sometimes the galaxy's salvation comes from the most unexpected places. The battle for the galaxy's survival was about to begin. For the first time since the crisis started, there was hope. Admiral Wujin stood on the bridge of the human flagship Defiance, watching as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Corvanian system. What they found there was a vision of hell itself. The once beautiful system, home to 3 billion Droo civilians, was now wrapped in writhing shadows that seemed to devour light itself. Battle stations! Ujin commanded, his voice steady despite the horror before them. All ships, prepare for immediate engagement. Remember, we're not just fighting for the Droo. If these creatures aren't stopped here, Earth is next. The human fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where Droo ships were elegant and crystalline, human vessels were brutal and practical. The Defiance itself looked like a flying fortress, its hull bristling with kinetic cannons and quantum disruptor arrays. Every surface was covered in the new void-resistant armor that Engineer Subin had developed. Admiral reported Tactical Officer Minho, "We're detecting massive void spawn concentrations around the third planet. They single, quotes, feeding on the population centers." They could see the nightmare in detail. The planet's surface was covered in a writhing mass of shadow creatures, each one the size of a city block. They moved like living storms, consuming everything in their path. The proud Droo cities, with their crystal spires and floating platforms, were being dissolved into nothingness. "Sir," Communications Officer Hay-1 called out. "We're receiving a weak distress signal from the orbital defense platform. There are still survivors aboard." Ujin made his decision instantly. "All ships, attack formation Delta, target the void spawn concentrations with kinetic bombardment," signaled the Marines. "We're going in to extract those survivors." The human fleet opened fire, and for the first time in months, the void spawn faced weapons that could actually hurt them. The kinetic cannons launched solid projectiles at incredible speeds. Chunks of depleted uranium that couldn't be absorbed or adapted to. When they hit the shadow creatures, the results were devastating. "Direct hit on the primary concentration," Minho shouted. "The creatures are actually taking damage." The void spawn, accustomed to feeding on energy weapons, recoiled from the kinetic assault. They tried to phase through the projectiles, but the quantum disruptors prevented them from shifting between dimensions. For the first time since the invasion began, the creatures were being hurt, but the void spawn were not defenseless. They adapted quickly, swarming toward the human ships in massive waves. However, unlike the Droo vessels, human ships were designed for this kind of fight. Their void-resistant armor held firm as the creatures crashed against their hulls. "Marine landing craft away," reported the flight controller. "Sergeant Hyanwu is leading the assault on the defense platform." The human Marines were volunteers, every one of them. They knew this was likely a suicide mission, but they had trained for years specifically to fight the void spawn. Their armor was reinforced with quantum dampening materials. Their weapons were kinetic-based, and their hearts were filled with the determination of a species that refused to surrender. Sergeant Hyanwu led his team through the corridors of the Droo defense platform, a massive structure that had once been home to 50,000 military personnel. Now it was a haunted maze of shadows and corrupted technology. The station's AI had been turned against its creators, and every system was actively hunting the remaining survivors. "Movement ahead," whispered Corporal So Young, her scanner detecting life signs. "Looks like a group of civilians barricaded in the command center." "Stay tight," Hyanwu ordered. "Remember your training. The void spawn can't phase through our armor, but they can still drain you if you give them the chance." As they moved deeper into the station, the shadows began to move. Void spawn materialized. From the walls, their tendrils reaching out hungrily. But the human Marines were ready. Their kinetic rifles opened fire, sending streams of solid projectiles through the creatures. Unlike energy weapons, these couldn't be adapted to or absorbed. "Keep moving," Hyanwu shouted as his team fought their way through the corridors. "The survivors are this way." They reached the command center to find 30 Droo civilians huddled together, their elegant features twisted with terror. Among them was Commander Zexal, the station's former commanding officer. Zexal whispered in disbelief. "The humans. You actually came to save us." "That's what allies do," Hyanwu replied, helping the wounded Droo to his feet. "Now let's get you out of here." The evacuation was harrowing. The Marines had to fight their way back through corridors filled with void spawn, protecting the civilians every step of the way. They lost 2 good soldiers, Privates Jaseok and Minjin, who sacrificed themselves to hold a choke point while the others escaped. Meanwhile, In space, the battle raged on. The human fleet was taking heavy losses, but they were inflicting damage on the void spawn that no previous force had managed. Ship after ship unleashed their kinetic weapons, slowly pushing the creatures back from the planet's surface. Captain Junho, the same officer who had survived the first void spawn encounter, commanded the cruiser Resilience. His ship had been specially modified with the most advanced quantum disruptors available, making it one of the most effective anti-void spawn weapons in the fleet. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "we're detecting a massive void spawn concentration forming near the refugee fleet. They're about to attack the civilian transports." Junho could see the situation clearly. A convoy of Droo refugee ships, carrying thousands of civilians, was trapped between the planet and the void spawn. The creatures were massing for an attack that would consume every soul aboard those vessels. "All power to engines," he ordered. "We're going to intercept." "Sir," his first officer protested, "we can't reach them in time. The void spawn will overwhelm us." Junho looked at his crew, good people who had followed him through hell itself. "And we'll make our stand here. Signal the fleet. Tell them we're going to buy the refugees time to escape." The Resilience charged into the swarm of void spawn, her weapons blazing. Ship's quantum disruptors tore through the creatures, clearing a path for the refugee fleet. But there were too many of them. The void spawn swarmed over the ship like living shadows. "Hull breaches on all decks," reported the damage control officer. "We're losing power." Junho made his final decision. All hands abandoned ship, set the reactor to overload. As his crew evacuated to the escape pods, Junho remained on the bridge. The void spawn were already inside the ship, their tendrils reaching for him. But he held his position, his finger hovering over the reactor controls. "This is for everyone who said we were too primitive to matter," he whispered, and pressed the button. The Resilience exploded in a ball of nuclear fire that consumed hundreds of void spawn. The refugee fleet escaped, carrying thousands of Droo civilians to safety. But Captain Junho was gone, another hero lost in humanity's desperate gambit. The turning point came when Chief Engineer Subin detected something extraordinary on her sensors. "Admiral," she reported from the engineering ship Prometheus, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the planet's core. I think the void spawn are trying to open a portal." "A portal to where?" Wujin demanded. "Dimension," Subin replied. "If they succeed, millions more will pour through. The entire galaxy will be consumed." Subin looked at the readings and knew what had to be done. "Sir, I can stop them. But I'll need to manually activate a quantum bomb at the portal's location. The radiation will be lethal." "Find another way," Wujin ordered. "There is no other way," Subin said quietly. "The portal is protected by the planet's crust. Only a direct detonation will collapse it." Without waiting for orders, Subin launched herself toward the planet in a single-person fighter. She fought her way through swarms of void spawn, her small craft taking terrible damage. But she reached the portal site, a massive tear in reality itself, writhing with dark energy. "For Earth," she whispered, and activated the quantum bomb. The explosion was visible from orbit, a brilliant flash that sealed the portal forever. But Subin, the brilliant engineer who had made humanity's victory possible, was gone. The battle for Corvanian system was won, but at terrible cost. The human fleet had lost 60 ships and thousands of brave souls. They had proven something that the Droo Empire had thought impossible. The void spawn could be defeated as the surviving human ships regrouped. Admiral Wujin received a transmission from Admiral Vexstar. The proud Droo leader's voice was thick with emotion. "Admiral Wujin," Vexstar said, "your people have saved us. You have shown courage and sacrifice that puts our entire empire to shame. How can we ever repay this debt?" Wujin looked out at the stars, thinking of all the friends he had lost. "Help us finish this fight, Admiral. There are still more void spawn out there, and we can't stop them alone." The alliance between humans and Droo was forged in battle and sealed with sacrifice. Together, we would fight for the galaxy's survival. The final battle for the galaxy's survival began at dawn on the Droo homeworld. Admiral Wujin stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as the largest void-spawn swarm ever recorded approached. The crystal planet that had been the heart of galactic civilization for 3,000 years. Admiral, reported Tactical Officer Minho, his voice tight with tension. We're detecting over 50,000 individual void-spawn entities. They're moving in perfect formation like a single organism. Beside him, Admiral Vexstar's holographic image flickered with static. The proud Droo leader had changed dramatically since their first meeting. His silver eyes were haunted by loss, his elegant features marked by the weight of his empire's near extinction. The planetary defense grid is online, Vexstar reported. We've modified our energy weapons with your kinetic enhancement technology. It's strange to see our crystal cannons firing solid projectiles, but your methods work. The combined fleet was a sight to behold. Human ships, ugly and practical, flew alongside the few remaining Droo vessels with their elegant crystal hulls. The alliance had been forged in desperation, but it had grown into something stronger, mutual respect between species that had learned to fight as one. Sir, Communications Officer Haywan interrupted, we're receiving a message from the Void Spawn. They can communicate? Wujin asked. Surprised, the view screen flickered to life, showing a writhing mass of shadow that somehow managed to form words. When it spoke, its voice was like the whisper of dying stars. We are hunger, it said. We are the end of all things. Your resistance only delays the inevitable. We have consumed 1,000 galaxies, and we will consume yours. Admiral Vexstar's image leaned forward. Why? Why do you destroy everything you touch? Because existence is pain, the creature replied. We end that pain. We bring the peace of the void to all living things. Your suffering will soon be over. Wujin cut the transmission. All ships, prepare for battle. Today we make our stand. The void spawn came like a tide of living darkness, their numbers blotting out the stars. But this time, the defenders were ready. The human fleet opened fire with their kinetic weapons, sending streams of solid projectiles into the swarm. Droo planetary cannons, modified with human technology, added their own devastating volleys. Direct hits across the board. Minho shouted, the creatures are taking heavy damage. But the void spawn had learned from their previous encounters. They split into smaller groups, using hit-and-run tactics to avoid the worst of the bombardment. Some phased through the outer defenses, reaching the planet's surface before the quantum disruptors could stop them. Ground forces are reporting void spawn landings in the capital city, Vexstar, S-Aid reported. They're moving toward the population centers. On the planet's surface, the crystal spires of the Droo capital were under siege. The creatures flowed through the streets like living shadows, consuming everything in their path. But the Droo had learned from humanity's example. Instead of relying solely on energy weapons, they had armed their soldiers with kinetic rifles and quantum grenades. Captain Sungmin led a squad of human marines through the crystal corridors of the central palace, fighting alongside Droo's soldiers to evacuate the remaining civilians. The sight of the two species working together would have been impossible. Just months before, the creatures are adapting faster than before, reported Sergeant Hyanwu, firing his kinetic rifle at a mass of approaching shadows. They're learning to partially resist our weapons. Then we adapt too, Sungmin replied, switching to his quantum disruptor. Keep moving. We need to reach the evacuation point. In space, the battle raged with unprecedented fury. The human ship, Prometheus, exploded in a ball of fire, taking dozens of void spawn with it. The Droo cruiser Crystal Dawn went dark as shadow creatures overwhelmed its defenses. Ships from both fleets were falling, but they were taking the enemy with them. Admiral, reported the weapons officer. We're down to 60% of our original fleet strength. The void spawn have lost about half their numbers, but they're still pressing the attack. Wujin studied the tactical display, looking for any advantage. Then he saw it, a weakness in the void spawn formation. Signal all ships, we're going to try something desperate. He opened a channel to Admiral Vexstar. Admiral, I need you to do something that goes against everything the Droo have ever believed. I need you to trust human judgment completely." Vexstar didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" "Order your ships to form a defensive sphere around the planet. We're going to use your crystal technology to create a massive quantum resonance field." "That's impossible," Vexstar protested. "The power requirements alone would drain every ship in the fleet. Not if we combine it with our kinetic bombardment system," Wu Jin explained. "We'll create a feedback loop that should disrupt the void spawn's ability to phase between dimensions." It was a desperate plan requiring perfect coordination between two species that had been enemies just months before. But as the void spawn pressed their final assault, it was their only hope. "All Droo ships, channel your crystal energy into a unified field," Vexstar commanded. "All human ships, prepare for simultaneous kinetic bombardment on my mark." The combined fleet moved with precision that would have been impossible without the trust forged in battle. The Droo ships formed a perfect sphere around their homeworld, their crystal hulls glowing with accumulated energy. The human ships positioned themselves at strategic points, their kinetic cannons trained on the void spawn swarm. "Field is at maximum resonance," reported the Droo science officer. "But we can't maintain it for long. The power drain is enormous." "Now," Wu Jin shouted. The human fleet fired in perfect unison, their kinetic projectiles enhanced by the quantum field. The effect was beyond anything they had hoped for. The void spawn, caught in the resonance field, couldn't phase away from the bombardment. They were trapped in normal space, vulnerable to the devastating assault. "It's working," Minho shouted. "Creatures are being destroyed faster than they can adapt." But victory came at a price. The power drain was too much for the combined fleet. One by one, ships began to lose power and fall from formation. The Defiance herself was running on emergency power, her systems failing across the board. "Sir," reported the engineering officer, "we're losing containment on the reactor. We have maybe 10 minutes before total power failure." Wu Jin looked at the tactical display. The void spawn were nearly defeated, but not quite. There were still thousands of them, and if the resonance field failed now, they would survive to continue their assault. "Admiral Vexstar," he said quietly, "it's been an honor fighting alongside you." "The honor was mine," Vexstar replied. "Your species taught us what true courage means." The resonance field held for exactly 9 minutes and 47 seconds. When it finally collapsed, the void spawn were gone. Every single creature had been destroyed. Their threat to the galaxy ended forever. The surviving ships of both fleets floated in space, their crews exhausted but victorious. The cost had been enormous. The human fleet was reduced to 30 ships, and the Droo had lost their last battle cruisers. But they had won. 3 months later, on the rebuilt human colony of New Geneva, a ceremony took place that would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Vexstar, representing what remained of the Droo Empire, stood before the newly formed Galactic Council. Droo Empire formally requests admission to the human-led Galactic Alliance, he announced, his voice carrying across the assembly hall. "We come not as conquerors, but as partners. We have learned that true strength comes not from technology or military might, but from the willingness to stand together against the darkness." Human diplomat Taesung, the same man who had tried to warn the Droo so many months before, stepped forward to accept the application. Behind him stood monuments to the heroes who had died in the war. Captain Junho, Engineer Subin, and thousands of others who had sacrificed everything to save a galaxy that had once scorned them. "The Alliance accepts your application," Taesung said formally, "but we do so not as your superiors, but as your equals. The galaxy is large enough for all of us to share." As the ceremony concluded, Vexstar found himself standing beside the memorial wall, reading the names of the human heroes who had died saving his people. Taesung joined him, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "Your daughter would be proud," Taesung said quietly. "She was the one who convinced you to ask for help." "She was braver than her father," Vexstar admitted. "It took the near extinction of our species to teach us humility." "The galaxy is different now," Taesung observed. "The void spawn threat brought us together, but it also showed us what we can accomplish when we work as one." Maybe something good came from all that darkness. Vexstar nodded, watching as human and Droo children played together in the plaza below. The mighty Droo Empire was no more, reduced to 30 worlds and a handful of ships. But in its place was something better, a true alliance between species that had learned to see each other not as superior or inferior, but as family. The galaxy had been saved, and its future was brighter than ever before. Retroclad can make mistakes. Responses: